Activists from the direct action group Palestine Action are facing what lawyers and human rights groups describe as an alarming escalation in state repression. From prolonged pre-trial detention to the use of counter-terrorism laws typically reserved for violent offenders, campaigners say the British government is criminalising dissent in an unprecedented way. I spoke to activists and their families, many of whom have spent months behind bars without conviction, to understand the motivations behind their actions and the personal cost of standing against Israel's weapons trade.
Early one morning in August, I had 4 police officers come to my door with a search warrant for Zoe's bedroom.
We were actually, all of us were sent to prison and we were held on remand.
So we got arrested, we got taken to the police station. I was remanded into custody for 9 months without trial.
Ronny, an Israeli dissident, was arrested after he took action against the Bristol headquarters of Israel's largest weapons manufacturer, Elbit Systems, in May 2022. He was imprisoned along with 8 other activists after an intervention by the Crown Prosecution Service to deny them bail. Palestine Action said this was the first time this had happened to their activists. During his trial in 2024, the judge denied him a series of legal defences which could have led to his acquittal.
So I'm an Israeli dissident and I was born and raised there and have been active for decades now, basically, against a long list of Israeli violations, a long list of crimes, some of which are war crimes and crimes against humanity. We took action on Nakba Day, which was 15th of May 2022, against the Elbit Systems headquarters in Bristol, UK. Now, Elbit Systems is Israel's #1 arms manufacturer. They produce the vast majority of the weapons that are being used right now in Gaza to slaughter, to maim people, to genocide people of Gaza. So I participated in an action against the Elbit Systems headquarters, which was moved from London to Bristol because it was shut down in London because of direct action. Just after it was moved to Bristol, we took action there. We were there for a few hours and then arrested. And what happened up until that point in previous such similar action is that activists would spend some time under police custody and then released possibly under bail condition. And at the time, we had also defenses in the law. I could later show up to the court and say, yes, I may have caused certain damage, but I did this in order to avert a greater damage. I may have caused damage, but I did this in order to save lives. And on and on. There are several defenses in the law. There used to be several defenses in the law. By the time that we had a trial, and I'll get to that, we had no defenses left because the state has been acting in order to deny us these defenses. So after an action, we got arrested, but rather than being released on bail, which was the case up until that point, we were actually, all of us were sent to prison and we were held on remand, while the rest, who are British citizens, were released after about a week. The 2 of us who are actually Israeli dissidents were kept on remand for a whole month. And during that time, this was already unprecedented. This was the first time that any person, an actionist from Palestine Action, arrived in prison and was held on remand. I spent a month on remand in prison. And then after that, there were harsh bail conditions. We were basically kept under house arrest for a year. The 2 of us who were on remand before for a month. And I was stuck in the UK. I am not a citizen or resident of the UK. I had to change my entire life. My whole reality changed. I didn't plan on staying there for 2 years, actually, 1 year under house arrest, and then we had a trial. And that was a whole saga, a whole ordeal in itself. The trial got pushed back quite a bit eventually. While we had the trial, we had no defenses left for us to argue because the state has been taking away, chipping away at the law to make it more and more difficult to put people like us behind bars. Still, we were convicted nonetheless because the jury were not on our side. Then the judge gave us all a suspended sentence and he ordered us to pay compensation to Elbit. First of all, I don't have the money to pay compensation, but secondly, also morally and legally, I am unable to do so. This is the situation in a nutshell of what the UK has been doing, but actually the crackdown against activists, and now it is the last of a long chain of escalation of this crackdown. This started over a decade ago. There has been a new anti-terror legislation being introduced where now we have the Filton 18, for example, 18 activists, actionists who are behind bars on remand for well over half a year. So they are there before trial, and they were arrested under this new Terrorism Act, even though they are not charged with terrorism, but they are being treated as such as terrorists, and they're being treated in harsh conditions, again, in order to allow the state to silence as much as they can this type of activism.
We also speak to Cla Hinchcliffe, the mother of one of the Filton 18 prisoners, Zoe Rogers. Zoe was arrested under terrorism charges in connection with an action targeting Elbit's Bristol-based research hub in August 2024, along with 17 other activists. While the terrorism charges have been dropped, the Filton 18 have been repeatedly refused bail and have been held on remand for close to a year. In January, UN special rapporteurs wrote to the government raising concerns about the use of counter-terror legislation to prolong the detention and improve restrictions on activists.
Early one morning in August, I had 4 police officers come to my door with a search warrant for Zoe's bedroom and the news that she was being held in a police station in Bristol. And they couldn't tell me any more than that. But what I did expect and what they told me was that I would get a phone call within 24 hours from Zoe. And that phone call never came, and it didn't come. And it didn't come, and it didn't come for days because she had been rearrested, as 10 of them had been, under the Terrorism Act. And that meant that they had the right to call anyone stripped away. They had, ultimately they were held for 7 days before being charged. And in that time they were held in solitary confinement, completely incommunicado, unable to make a single telephone call, and interrogated day and night. So this was the point where the counter-terror powers kicked in against my daughter and against the Filton group. And it's an abuse of counter-terror powers that's been picked up by UN experts. It was really, really shocking. So those first few days were an utter nightmare. We don't know, we've never seen this before. We've never seen terrorism powers used against direct action protesters. This is completely new territory for us. So none of us knew what to do. And it was just awful knowing, finally I got in touch with her solicitor and I found out that she was in a terrorist detention suite, and I knew that she was being interrogated day and night, and there was nothing I could do. And the solicitor wasn't able to be very reassuring. He said, I'm talking to her and I can tell you that none of them are bearing up very well. These are really traumatic circumstances. And then finally I got to see her through 2 layers of security glass at Westminster Magistrates Court, only to watch the judge remand her to prison. It was hellish. I couldn't speak to her. I didn't know how she was doing. She didn't know how I felt about what had happened. And I finally got a tearful phone call from her almost 2 weeks after she was arrested, when they finally allowed her to call from the prison as a high security prisoner. And her first words were, "Mum, I'm so sorry for what I've put you through." And I was like, you are not the one who should be sorry here. So the way the counter-terror powers work is still affecting them. And it's just insidious and unjust, frankly. So although they were charged with ordinary criminal offences like burglary and criminal damage, they still have a terrorist connection attached to their charges. And it's still led by counter-terrorist police, their investigation. So the court is using a terrorist protocol for their trial. So there's still this sort of lingering, they're not charged under the Terrorist Act yet, there's still this kind of lingering sense that they are terrorists. They're all in high security prisons. They are being treated very differently to ordinary prisoners. And one result of that has been that all 18 have been denied bail. Just a blanket denial of bail. Although the custody time limit before trial should be 6 months. My daughter's been in prison now for nearly 11 months. It will be 15 months when she comes to trial of prison. They aren't breaking the law, they're justifying this. They're finding ways around it. So first of all, they extended the custody time limit. And then they decided that this is now there's a terrorism connection to the case. They sort of reaffirmed that. And that means that effectively the trial has begun. There was a pre-trial hearing to sort out some admin, and they said, oh, and by the way, the trial has begun because it's terrorism protocol. And that was months ago. So as far as they're concerned, they're on remand during their trial. And yet for some of them, the trial won't be until October 2026. It reminds me of the administrative detention that Palestinians are given in Israeli prisons. It's completely unjust. It's imprisonment without trial. 4 UN experts wrote a report raising concerns about the Filton case. And one of the things that they were concerned about was that initial detention, incommunicado for days on end. And they called that enforced disappearance. So this is something you'd see in a dictatorship. It's terrifying. But then it's gone on to affect them even while they are in prison on remand. The fact that they are on remand at all was picked up by the UN experts, and they said that blanket denial of bail was not acceptable. But then they are treated as high security prisoners, and that has placed restrictions on them. One of the things that they've been doing is, because there are so many co-defendants of the 18 in one prison, because so many of them are women, and therefore a lot of them are in Bronzefield, where my daughter Zoe is. And early on, they tried to put a non-association order on them. A non-association order is usually reserved for prisoners who are a risk to national security. These are high security prisoners. It's very unusual, and yet they applied it to our loved ones early on in Bronzefield, and that had terrible effects on all of them, especially for my daughter, because they kept her to keep her away from the others. They put her in the induction wing, where people were just coming in every few days. She wasn't able to make any friends or settle down in any way, and she was there for 2 months, and it massively affected her mental health. It was awful. Since then, I think because there are so many, there's another wave of arrests, and there are now 9 women in Bronzefield. They dropped the non-association order, but instead they've been sort of picking them off one by one, transferring them to other prisons. And the way they do this is very unusual. Usually if a prisoner is being transferred, they will be given 2 or 3 days notice, and they might even be given a choice as to where they're transferred to. In Bronsefield's case, where the prison where my daughter is, they will give them maybe 5 minutes notice. Pack your bags, you're going, and we're not telling you where we're taking you, and we're not telling your closest relative where we're taking you. So once again, it's like a disappearance, and then they're taken away from their co-defendants and from their families. So we had medication withheld. The food is awful. She's kind of surviving. She's getting enough calories because she orders in snacks, because she can afford to order snacks once a week. Not everyone can do that. Before the snacks came in and she was trying to survive on prison food, she was drinking ketchup between meals because she was so hungry. I mean, these prisons are not fit for purpose, and that's a women's prison. The men's prisons are far, far worse. But I think something that has kept her going and has made her stronger over time is that sense of, she knows why she did it, and she feels, as many of us do, that she did the right thing. She can go to sleep at night knowing that she did something to stop another child being killed in Gaza, because they managed to destroy some of the killer drones that they found in the Elbit Systems factory that they broke into.
Fran was arrested for taking action against Teledyne, a company which manufactures parts of Israeli missiles, in Bradford in May 2023. Despite not having any previous convictions, she was repeatedly denied bail and was held in custody for a year without being convicted.
So we got arrested, we got taken to the police station, and what we're seeing more and more now, and what the police did to us, was misuse their powers. So usually the police are allowed to keep suspects, people that have been arrested for 24 hours. They can only extend this in exceptional circumstances. They extended it, I'm not sure if it was for at least 48 hours, it might have been 72 hours, I don't remember. Either way, they extended that on very spurious reasons. They also decided to strip search us with a very spurious explanation. As far as I'm concerned, that was just a way to humiliate us, and it's quite typical. I'm sure almost everyone who's been arrested will tell you the same thing, that the police just treat anyone who's been arrested or detained just so badly. They treat you like you're a scumbag, and they can do anything they want because it's all under wraps there. For example, I couldn't get my medication, which I need for epilepsy, which is a serious condition. If you don't have the medication, it can have very serious consequences. And I repeatedly asked for the nurse. At one point, one of the police officers told me that the nurse didn't want to see me. And as I said to them, it doesn't really work like that. But you can see the kind of attitude that we were received with the police. And after that, we got taken to court, and we were all given bail that day, but shortly after that I took part in another action at Barclays Bank in Leeds, and that's when I got remanded into custody. I was remanded into custody at a prison in Wakefield called New Hall for 9 months without trial. I applied for bail various times. Every time it was denied. Again, as far as I'm concerned, without any reasonable justification. Again, I can see that the courts manipulate the rules to their own end, and there's a very strong leaning towards more and more draconian treatment right now of all prisoners, not just people like us who take politically motivated actions. So the usual legal time limit for remand is 6 months, but I met so many people that had been remanded for longer than that. So of course there's a lot of delays in the court because they're underfunded, they've got this massive backlog from COVID, etc., etc. But there's still no reasonable explanation as to why there's so many people remanded into prison. In any of my bail applications, they could have quite easily given me a curfew tag, which is what happened in the end, because the trials kept getting delayed so many different times. They could have quite easily given me a curfew tag and sent me home. And that's the usual thing to do, in fact. If you break your bail once, they'll give you a curfew tag and give you another chance, essentially, before they send you to prison. They completely missed out that step, and I believe that was just to make an example of me, because as we've all seen, things are becoming more and more draconian against political activists right now.
Now, the UK government is seeking to ban Palestine Action outright under terrorism legislation, a move that would make it a criminal offence not only to be part of the group, but to show any support for it. This follows a series of legal crackdowns, activists held on remand for months without trial, denied bail without justification, and in some cases charged under laws meant to target terrorism.